Look up towards the heavens and praise the almighty sun. Most of us know about Jupiter, Mars, Minerva, the most famous gods of the Roman pantheon, that were, for the most part, reinterpretations of the original Greek pantheon. But today, let's take a look at Sol, this very unique solar deity that the Romans worshipped. Some of you might be thinking, hey, the Greeks had a sun god as well, that's Helios. And yes, you would be right, Helios, but the relationship between the Romans and Sol is quite unique. He was different. While Helios was somewhat of a minor deity, Sol was, for a time at least, a very big deal, particularly in the later empire. Let's explore what made this god unique for the Romans, and of course, let's look at some amazing coins featuring him. Let's get started. The worshipping of Sol can be traced back all the way to the time Rome was ruled by its legendary kings. Aesthetically, it's really easy to connect Sol to the Greek Helios. Greeks and Romans represented him as this young, unbearded, radiant man with a crown of sun rays on his head. Sol represented all of the positive attributes of the sun, a giver of warmth and life, this god of unstoppable force. They used to call him SOL INVICTUS, unconquered, referencing to the fact that every single day the sun will always rise above the horizon. It doesn't matter how dark the night shall be, how bad the times were, the sun would always rise with no force being able to prevent its march across the sky. It's a truly beautiful myth. So this cult of Sol was also influenced by a series of different Eastern cults, in particular Mithraism and the Syrian cult of El Gabal. This unique mix resulted on this god that became an overarching presence above the rest of the Roman pantheon. To worship Sol was, in a way, to lie in the middle ground between a polytheistic and somewhat of a monotheistic religion. Sol for many embodied the presence of all of the other gods, manifesting all of their natures, so to speak, into a single source of good. The best way to show this complex nature of this Roman sun god is to actually go over some coins. So let's bring the first one up on the screen. And we start in the 2nd century AD with a denarius of Emperor Trajan. This piece was struck in Rome in the last year of his reign, 117 AD. Trajan was first and foremost a general, a man of the military, so it's not hard to guess that lots of his coins nodded to the importance of the army, where the cult of the sun god was really strong. Here we can see a bust of the emperor wearing his cuirass under a cloak. This cloak was called a paludamentum, by the way. And on the legends, we read the many honorific titles that were given to him by the Senate. It reads, Imperator Caesar Nerva Traiano, Optimo Augusto, literally meaning the best emperor, Germanicus Dacicus, conqueror of the Germans and the Dacians. As we go to the reverse, we are greeted by him, SOL INVICTUS. Here we have this young, unbearded portrait of the god, wearing his spiky crown of sun rays, with a long hair falling down his shoulders. The resemblance to the god Helios, but also to Apollo, is quite remarkable. Both gods were connected to this idea of light, brightness, majesty. Apollo in particular is often shown with this long hair, so it's interesting to see how they chose to depict Sol here, mixing visual attributes of both gods. The legends on the reverse continue on with Trajan's titles. From the obverse, we read Partico, conqueror of the Parthians, Pontifex Maximus Tribunicia Potestas, consul for the 6th year, and finally, Pater Patriae Senatus Populusque Romanus, father of the nation, the Senate, and the people of Rome. We then move to the 3rd century AD. Let's have a look at one of Rome's most colorful and, shall I say, controversial characters. Between 218 and 222 AD, a young man called Sextus Avitus Bassianus, a relative from the ruling Severan dynasty, was raised to the purple, to the position of emperor. He is known today as Elagabalus. Born and raised in Roman Syria, young Sextus here was a priest of the local cult of El Gabal, an Eastern sun god. Elagabalus was a highly eccentric individual. He showed complete disregard for the rest of the Roman pantheon, worshipping El Gabal exclusively and forcing Rome's elite to worship him as well. This antagonizing of Rome's original pantheon, as well as his scandalous sex life, led to his very quick downfall, organized, mind you, by his own grandmother. His very short reign gives us an interesting glimpse on how the empire allowed different religions to be practiced around its territory, as long as they didn't interfere with the proper functioning of the Roman state. Syrian cults had always influenced Roman religion. The cult of Elgabal was no different. This was not a monotheistic religion, but it stated in its scripture that all other gods were inferior to Elgabal, which was the ultimate manifestation of the virtues of all gods. The problem, however, lay in how Elagabalus enforced his religion upon the Romans. Religion and the state were inseparable during the imperial era. If an emperor worshipped Sol, or any solar deity he wanted, that wasn't really the issue. The problem started when Elagabalus began disrupting centuries-old Roman traditions in order to conduct his rites. He transferred the most important statues and treasures from other temples to his new temple dedicated to Elgabal, and forbade any cults to other gods if these cults didn't include Elgabal in its liturgy. He even took a Vestal virgin as a wife. This was major sacrilege. For many, he threatened what was called the Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods. If the Roman people, according to tradition, did not observe the proper way of worshipping their gods, it was a matter of time until the gods noticed, got very angry, and avenged themselves against Rome in the form of social unrest, crisis, disasters, bad omens. This led to Elagabalus' very quick and violent death in the 4th year of his reign. I'm actually surprised he lasted so long. So let's have a look at one of his coins. Here we have a denarius, struck at the end of his reign. Here we have the young bust of Elagabalus. He was just 19 years old when he was killed. Mind you that this name, Elagabalus, was actually a nickname given by people after his death. His official regnal name took inspiration on the good emperors of the 2nd century as a way of gaining him some legitimacy. And as we can read in the legends, he was called Imperator Antoninus Pius Augustus. On the reverse, we have the emperor worshipping his sun god, as he was also the chief priest of this cult prior to him becoming emperor. We can see his full body image right next to a fire altar where he would make offerings. He holds a patera, which was a little pot priests used to make liquid offerings over the fire, and he holds a branch on another head. The legends read, Sacerdos Dei Solis Elagabali, or the priest of the sun god Elagabal. After the fall of the Severan dynasty, the empire would fall into a 50-year-long period of pretty much military anarchy, in which Rome nearly fell. Out of this chaos, a series of competent general emperors finally stabilized the situation around the 270s AD. Aurelian was the most important of these men, reunifying the empire under his sole authority and stomping out all of his potential usurpers. Aurelian, as a man of the military, was a staunch worshipper of Sol. His incredible 5-year reign, full of incredible victories, served as a very strong argument for this sun god. In the late 3rd century saw a number of new temples dedicated to Sol being raised in many different places around the empire, including a massive temple in Rome. Let's take a look at this example struck in 274 at the northern Italian mint of Ticinum. On the obverse we can see the austere portrait of Aurelian, wearing his military cuirass. This denomination is a double denarius, also called an Antoninianus, and to differentiate it from a single denarius, the portrait of the emperor had a radiate crown over his head, which is very fitting for Aurelian, as it's a very similar piece of headgear to what his patron deity, Sol, would be depicted wearing. The legends are straight to the point: Imperator Caesar Aurelianus Augustus. On the reverse, we have the glorious full-body image of Sol stepping over 2 captives. He wears nothing but a cloak over his shoulder and raises his hand in a saluting gesture, while holding a globe on his left hand. A clear connection to Aurelian's many defeated enemies during his stellar, but short, 5-year reign. The legends named the god on this reverse SOL INVICTUS, the unconquered sun. Such an amazing coin. Finally, At the lower part of the design, we have a mint mark. P for Oficina Prima, the first workshop of the Ticinum mint, and the numbers 20 to 1, meaning this coin had 20 parts copper for each part of silver. One of Aurelian's generals, Probus, was another sun worshipper. He reigned between 276 and 282. The reverse in this piece is fabulous. This depiction of Sol doesn't have anything Eastern about it. This one is pure Greek, pure Helios. In the original myth of Helios, when dawn came, he would mount on his 4-horse chariot and travel across the sky, bringing his light and his warmth to the world. And that is exactly what we have here. Sol on his chariot, galloping straight towards you, the viewer. That's really interesting. That's a really interesting use of perspective in this coin. The horses, like 2 of them are going to each side, so they're about to run you over, you the viewer. Behind the horses, we can see Sol saluting us with his hand raised. Or maybe he's just trying to ask us to move out of the way before his horses trample us. I don't know. Around the design, we once more have the legends. Sol Invictus, just like in the coin of Aurelian. Now heading to the obverse, we have Probus wearing consular robes. In the 3rd century AD, the Roman Senate was a pale shadow of its former self. The series of military dictators that ruled Rome in the last decades completely disregarded this old traditional institution. Probus seek to remedy that, go back to more traditional times, giving them authority once again and serving himself as a consul for a series of years. As we can see, he wears this very elaborate toga and holds a scepter with an eagle at its tip, which the consuls held to represent their power. On the legends we read, Imperator, Caesar, Marcus Aurelius Probus, Pius Felix Augustus. Once again we have a 3rd century emperor adding to his regnal titles, the name of one of the good emperors of the 2nd century. The Romans of the 3rd century must have really looked back at the previous century as a golden age of sorts. And finally we have Constantine. Most of us know Constantine as the first Christian emperor, and that's true, he did convert to Christianity, but he did so right before his death in 337 AD. For most of his life and his very long reign, he was yet another sun worshipper. In the early 4th century, when Constantine was in charge, there was a clear religious shift happening around the empire. The old Roman pantheon was losing followers fast, with many other religions, including Christianity and sun worshipping, gaining importance. It's interesting to think that maybe this pseudo-monotheistic sun worshipping allowed for an easier transition into Christianity. Imagine someone switching from a fully polytheistic religion to one that worshipped a single god. Now that would require some really dramatic transcendental experience for someone to change such a strong belief. But if you already believed in a god that represented the amalgamation of all virtues of different gods, switching to Christianity, for many, must have been merely the revelation of a divine truth that was simply misinterpreted previously. You can see that the switch is really easy, which leads us to the conclusion that maybe the cult of Sol worked as a primer for the spread of Christianity in late antiquity. After all, lots of Christian traditions, such as Christmas on the 25th of December, can be traced to sun-worshipping holidays, such as the Dies Natalis Soli Invicti. In any case, back to our little coin here, this Numus was struck between the years 310 and 313 AD at his first headquarters in Trier. At this time, Constantine was most likely still a pagan. On the obverse, we have the bust of the emperor, wearing the laurel wreath and his battle cuirass, in the same fashion as any emperor of the previous centuries. The legends read, Constantinus Pius Felix Augustus. And on the reverse, there he is, Sol, once again. Here we can see him in a pose quite similar to the one from the Aurelian coin we looked at, although this time Sol had the courtesy of not stepping over any poor captives. Once again, he raises his hand in a saluting gesture, and with the other hand he holds the world in his hands. The legends read, Soli Invictus Comiti, the unconquered sun, my companion. I particularly like this last part, Comiti, my companion. This could be a reference to the vision Constantine had at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, where, according to legend, he saw a presence manifesting on the heavens, asking him to paint the symbol of Christ on the shields of his army. That's really fascinating. It indicates that Constantine might have at first interpreted this vision as a solar vision, only later coming to the realization that it must have been a manifestation of the Christian God instead. Really interesting, and mind you, this is a very affordable little coin. These are super common. As we can see, the sun god was pretty relevant in the late Roman Empire, and might have been an important factor that helped Rome convert into Christianity as quickly as it did. Now I want to hear from you, collectors. Have you got a coin featuring Sol? Let us know in the comment section down below. I hope you enjoyed this little episode. Leave a like and consider subscribing if you did. Happy collecting, and I'll see you soon.